Today I will be discussing the short story, All the Sad, etc., written by Stephanie Powell Watts, a short story within the book We Are Taking Only What We Need. I believe the title of this story is interesting when you look at it and try to decipher its meaning because it says all the sad. It makes you question whether the characters within the story are experiencing lots of sadness. If they are experiencing all the sadness, what exactly is implied by all the sadness? And then the author goes on, of course they put etc. at the end of the title, which again you may consider etc. when it is used is typically referring to other things that are not listed, almost as like a way to say and then some, as if there's more on top of what you're saying. So when the author writes all the sad etc., it's as if they're implying that it is all of the sadness and then some on top of it, which we'll see as we come into play here when we continue to talk about the story itself. So let's move into the simple plot. The simple plot of the story is it is just a mother and a daughter visiting their family member in the mental hospital. The setting of the story takes place in 1998 on Christmas Day, which impacts one of the characters later. We'll get into it. And then it takes place in the lobby of the Broughton Mental Hospital, and then it continues in the common area where they eventually meet their family member and speak with them. The story introduces us to a couple characters. There's three main characters and then a few extras that we get to meet. Kim, she is who I believe I'd consider the main character. She is the sibling of Douglas, the daughter of Paula. And together, Kim and Paula, they are visiting Douglas in the mental hospital. Douglas is the son with the mental illness, which, again, we'll get further into. I think you can consider in this story Kim to be the protagonist because she's the one who explains a lot of the backstory necessary for it as she reflects back on her past. Additionally, Kim is the individual that we see the story through, so that's why I think we consider her the protagonist. Although I do think there could also be an argument potentially that Douglas is the protagonist, as Douglas is the one who's actually attempting to overcome something. He's the person who is within the mental hospital, visited by his family members, with, there's the hopes that after all the medicine and all of the counseling that he receives, that he'll come out a better person. Frank, he's a very short character we meet in the beginning of the story. He's the man in the lobby. He helps the two main family members help find Douglas. And then we also are introduced to another patient who is unnamed, but that patient is within the common area that Douglas is in. And the family gets to kind of see what it is like to actually be within the mental hospital and see the kind of people that Douglas gets to be around and involved. Now moving into the full plot or the summary of the story itself. In the beginning, we are in the waiting room at the hospital. Kim and Paula are looking around and they recognize that all the Christmas decorations around. All the Christmas decorations brings Kim back to some memories of when she was around 10 or 12 years old, reflecting on some of the experiences that she had at that age. She is a former Jehovah's Witness, no longer active, but we know that being a Jehovah's Witness kind of made her stop celebrating Christmas as much. I don't believe it ever states whether or not Paula is still a Jehovah's Witness, but there's still implications that Paula was also a part of it as well. So they go to Frank over at the desk and ask to kind of help find Douglas where he is, and eventually he finds him in the computer and he guides them through the hospital. They travel through an elevator, travel through the hallways. Paula says actually that we have never found this place without him. I think that goes to show how large the mental asylum itself actually was, and that can kind of tell us a few things, such as how many people were experiencing mental struggles. If the hospital is so large, of course they have to have the rooms to support them. As we move on from that scene there, Kim, she enters the meeting room. She starts discussing with Douglas, but before they actually go inside, Kim begins to remember a lot of memories. She's remembering Douglas before he was in the mental hospital, a lot of things that he did. And there's actually a running joke within their family where they're constantly referring to the hospital itself as like, oh, who's gonna go next? And Kim begins to lose her composure, and it's here that Paula kind of like enforces her motherly power and tells her to compose herself, not to let Douglas see this. Same thing when they were in the elevator in the hallway. Paula again instructs Kim to calm down, because as soon as they reach the floor, Kim is trying to pry open the doors. She's trying to get out of the elevator so she can go and see him. Once she composes herself, she does enter the room. They greet Douglas. They talk to him briefly. I don't think Kim very often actually visits Douglas. I think it's more of a recent thing, because throughout the story, she's constantly thinking about how. Excuse me. She's constantly thinking about how Douglas doesn't deserve to be here, even with all the things that he's experienced. That he doesn't deserve to be here, and she has a lot of thoughts that she deems herself. She deems them selfish. There's one line specifically where she says, "This is not about you. This was treatment. This is medicine. It's not about you." So Kim is having an internal battle with herself, trying to deal with the fact that her brother is in a mental hospital, and she's conscious of the fact that she has to keep her composure here. While they're playing games. They're playing table tennis, and some very important information here is that Douglas continues to play over and over and over again, continues to play table tennis. Kim will hit a ball over, it'll go over to his side, and Douglas doesn't even react until the ball has already gone off the table and until it has landed on the floor. I think that goes to show how the medication has been affecting him, because he is unable to actually perceive things at accurate times. Either that, or he's unable to control his body as intuitively as he should be able to. And then they play this other game, of course, as well. As they're playing these games, the other patient, which we referenced earlier, he comes up to them and he talks to Kim multiple times. First time, just kind of greets, tells her, how's your day going, that kind of conversation. He wanders off, and he comes back and he gives something to Kim and tells Kim that he likes her. I don't think it's very clear. He definitely doesn't seem like a romantic kind of interest or anything, but he is definitely not all there. Again, he's in a mental asylum, so we're seeing another character who his actual character isn't present. He's definitely on heavy use of medication and is unable to properly interact with other characters. Eventually, they go and say goodbye. They say goodbye and go to leave. It's at this point where we kind of get to see into Paula's emotions a little bit more. They go to say goodbye. Douglas immediately goes to leave, and Kim goes, "Wait, are you leaving?" And Douglas doesn't really think anything of it, just shrugs his shoulders and kind of continues to walk away. Kim begins laughing at this, but this is where Paula eventually breaks through. She'd been hiding her emotions very well, but seeing her son struggle as much as he is struggling, she looks to Kim mid-laughter, tells her to stop. She balls her hands into fists as if she's angry, as if she's upset, and she tells her to just stop it. Now, again, let's kind of move back into the perspective here. So Kim, as I said before, she's the protagonist. Throughout the story, we get random flashbacks and her thoughts about different things. One of them here is, if she could get away with a few errant thoughts about poverty-laced Christmases, she'd be fine, more than fine. So being in the mental hospital, seeing all these things, it reflects bad memories. And it isn't necessarily the Christmas itself that was really bad. It was that it reminded her of the struggling that her family went through when she was younger, the poverty-laced Christmases. Had she been in a more fortunate situation, she probably would look at Christmases with a little bit more joy. as I said earlier, there's the hospital, the family that there was a family joke about the hospital. She compared Douglas, before she had met him, she'd compared Douglas to a lot of former men. There was one man who remembered absolutely everything, who could write things down, who she still gave the title of someone with a mental illness, but she compared this to someone like Douglas. Douglas, who we find out she has memories of him, his room, who had walls, holes that was just completely destroyed, the walls, polka dotted as it says in the text. Words written in crayon all over the place, the stench of piss slapping you to attention. A normal man doesn't have these problems. And I believe this is still interesting because Kim still believes that Douglas doesn't belong here. And I think it should be less of that. I think intuitively she understands that Douglas isn't supposed to be here, or that he is supposed to be here. I think it's more of the fact that Douglas is away from her. It's a family member that she had grown up with that she lost. Douglas also tells her about some of the voices that appear in his head. And the voice doesn't ever say anything positive. It only tells him negative things, like to drop his pants when there's a woman, that nothing matters, and that the voices have convinced Douglas that he was over 400 years old. Keep in mind here that Kim is older than Douglas. Kim remembers him as a child, so obviously, like, everybody understands that he's not 400 years old. She understands that Douglas is struggling. And again, I think this is why, I don't know if she just doesn't have faith in the mental asylum, but she truly cares for her brother, and she wants the best for her brother. The structure of the story is a little complicated because a lot of the things that are introduced to us are introduced through those the little flashbacks, the backstories that Kim provides to us. The exposition in the story, I think, is just, of course, entering the hospital, talking to Frank, and eventually making their way to Douglas. Through the rising action, when they approach Douglas, you can sense a built tension. The characters are experiencing more and more emotion. Kim is having to control her composure. And of course, she's remembering those memories of, like, the piss slapping her in the face, the holes in the walls, all the things that Douglas has done. At the climax, they eventually meet him. They're forced to kind of accept / ignore his mental state, his inability to play ping pong, what the medicine and what the hospital has been doing to him. The following action is them just continuing to play, continuing to try to make a conversation with Douglas, and then meeting that other character as well. And then the final, the end of it is when they go to say goodbye. I think a few key takeaways from the story is that, one, we'll just focus on one at a time. Even those who appear strong can be fragile. Looking back at Paula isn't trying to enforce heavy composure upon her daughter, make sure that everything's, like, telling her that you need to be stern. Don't allow him to see you like this, referring to Douglas. And at the very end of the story, we get to see where Paula, although she was acting so stern, she was actually experiencing a lot of emotion as well. And it only ever escaped at the very end of the story. That's one thing you can take away. I think another one is that the mental health has contagious negative effects. Even though Douglas was the man with an actual mental illness, voices in his head and such, his problems still negatively affected the rest of his family. His family felt pain for him. His family had a lot of regret about the situation. They wished better for him, and in Kim's circumstance, she didn't even want to be at the hospital just because it was giving her all those negative emotions. And I think that goes to show the mental health can have contagious negative effects. I also think that negative situations bring out denial. And what I mean by this is that, again, in Kim's situation, she knows her brother is not normal. Her brother has mental illnesses, yet all the while she's saying that he doesn't deserve to be here. He's not like the other people that are here. She has a more personal connection with Douglas, so she believes that, like, she knows that he is good, even with all the bad he does. However, she doesn't truly accept the fact that he needs to be in this mental hospital. I believe in my personal judgment for the story is that it is definitely one worth of study. The complexity of each character, Paula, her hidden emotion, herself as an authority figure, kind of reining in Kim. Kim, again, as she reflects back on her past as a Jehovah's Witness, her Christmases, her memories of Douglas outside of the hospital, and then the character of Douglas itself. The portrayal of a character who is heavily medicated, unable to play ping pong, unable to have a genuine conversation. I think that there's a lot that can be done delving into these characters, their characteristics themselves, and understanding why they think the way they think. I also think that the structure of the story is one worth of study as well. It's not as simple as this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. You kind of get introduced to what kind of appears to be the end of the story because he's on the road to recovery now. But as you're introduced to this end of the story, you get reminded by Kim of the negative things that happened. That would have been more of the rising action, more of the climax itself. Overall, I believe that this story is an excellent read, and I think there's a lot to be done with the complex character analysis.